I want to talk baseball, man.
Okay.
I mean, clearly you do so much more than that, but well, I'm sure we'll get it all in. But
Yeah, I'd say I do more football at this point than baseball.
Oh, that's cool too.
But I started off heavily in baseball. So
yeah, that's cool too. I mean, you don't have to go. This is no disrespect to you. You don't have to go too far to find landscape photographers.
No, I figured the sports has got to be the unique
super cool
angle for me.
It's super cool stuff. I've been on your website for the last little bit,
nice.
Just generating questions and such, and trying to make sure that the questions I ask you are, elicit valuable responses for listeners, as I'm sure they will. But first of all, man, thanks for your time. Appreciate you taking some time out of your day for an hour, 45 minutes, an hour and 15. I don't know. We never know how long these go, but I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to offer up some insight to not only myself and Aaron, but to everybody who listens on Mondays. So just want to say that before we get into anything, whether that's landscapes, whether that's football, whether that's baseball, or all of the above.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's I've been binging some of your recent podcasts, so it's a little surreal to feel like listening to you guys for a while, and I'm like, oh, now I'm on it. So
excellent.
That's cool.
Excellent.
That's cool. Well, Danny and I have been following each other for a while, and I don't know what hit or what struck, but I went to his page and I was looking through some things. Maybe a post came up on Instagram, and it just was like, oh yeah, like he has this whole other aspect to beyond landscape stuff and the beautiful fall photos that have been out recently, but this whole other side and a pretty impressive resume that's just on his Instagram bio. And I was like, this is interesting because it's a lot of what I like to do. But then there's this whole other avenue with the sports, Army football, some Rangers stuff, working with USA Today, MLB, Major League Baseball, for those of you that don't know the acronym. But yeah, just a plethora of different niches. And I was just like, we got to talk to this guy. So thank you.
So here we are.
So here we are. And we're gonna talk it out.
Excellent. Where's the best place to start, do you think?
Yeah, that's what I was going to do this. I want to hear the Seth question, which is usually like, please give us a rundown of how this all began and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, we could start there if you want. I would say, a lot of my photography inspiration began in college. I did, grow up with a disposable camera, on vacations, like probably a lot of kids did. And, but coming out of high school, I wanted to be a writer. I loved sports, wanted to get into sports journalism. That seemed like a cool career opportunity. Didn't really have any thought about photography. And I went to college. I was the sports editor of the college paper freshman year. And, just kind of dove headfirst into that. I was doing a lot of writing, covering games. I went to a state school. We certainly were not known for our athletic programs. So, for me, it was a good experience to just write a lot and meet a lot of people and interview people and kind of learn on the fly. And I think one thing that really kind of stuck with me is, I did a lot of newspaper layout, and I was editing my, stories I was writing, stories that other writers were putting together, and we needed photos. And a lot of times we didn't have photographers in college that were shooting the sports there. So I would get photos from the athletic department, and they would send me these professional photos. And I was just like, kind of blown away of like, wow, the quality, like whoever, I don't know who's taking these, but they are phenomenal. It was to the point where I was like, can I do this? Like, why can't I do this? And of course I had no idea what I was getting into or how difficult it was to create, the sports action photos that everyone is accustomed to seeing. I mean, I grew up collecting, hockey and baseball cards, and I think growing up looking at those pictures as a kid, you don't really appreciate what it takes to take those type of photos, and in terms of exposure and composition and the timing and how it all comes together. So I think subconsciously a lot of that. I was really into reading newspapers as a kid. I mostly read the sports section, and I would clip out articles and photos that I liked. And I think it all kind of snowballed at some point to me wanting to get into it. I had a friend in college who got like a really cheap point and shoot. I mean, this is 20 years ago, so this is like the infancy of digital photography. And he let me use it, and I was like, man, I really liked it. And I ended up getting my own little point and shoot camera, and it evolved into, I used some of my dad's film stuff. Eventually bought my own digital SLR, one of the first Canons that came out. And from there, I just started shooting a lot of sports on my own at college. I got some internships with a baseball team, with a newspaper. After college, I started shooting a lot of high school sports. It was a good way to get experience and make some money to reinvest in better equipment. And then all those experiences kind of led me eventually to getting a job at MLB, where I was hired primarily as a writer. But, by that point, I wanted to, my idea was I can market myself as someone who can write and take photos. I can go out to a game, cover it, get interviews, and get some like quality photos. And I thought at that time that would make me unique and versatile in terms of the journalism world. And I think it did. So I've done a variety of stuff at MLB, not all photo related. Definitely a lot of website building and support for minor league teams around the country. And then I got hooked up with USA Today. They used to be called US Press Wire about 10, 15 years ago. They were bought out by Gannett. Now they're USA Today Sports Images. And Army. I live pretty close to West Point. I had never been up there somehow, even though I grew up here in the Hudson Valley. And I went up there one year and photographed an Army football game, and I was just hooked, and I haven't missed many games since then. So it's and at this point it keeps me super busy. I'm photographing football every Saturday in the fall, and now I'm at a point where it's over, and I can kind of like take a breath and relax. You guys caught me at a good time here, where I've got a week off to not worry about anything photo related. Which
I like that a breath is a week.
Well, I mean, it's at least a week. I mean, the football season's over, baseball season's not over, so
right.
It's a good chance for me to kind of catch my breath. I mean, I know, a lot of photographers are probably interviewing. They're probably like every week they're just trying to go out there and find something to do. And it's like, for me, it's like I do so much, and then it's like, okay, I'm good now. Like I can just sit in bed and relax. I don't have to go out and shoot something this weekend. So
yeah, I mean, everyone's different. It's part of the great thing about having so many people like yourself on, all the different approaches. I mean, we had, we know Aaron and I know Dave Sanford, who shoots for the NHL. He usually just does the Winter Classic games, and he does the playoffs. And he has, as far as I know, he has other assignments, sure, but the rest of it is like building his wildlife portfolio. And that's pretty cool as well. Mm-hmm. Other people, are out every single day, either probably not getting paid every single day. If you are, that's tremendous, but always learning, always improving, always chasing passion. And so it's just, I say this to just remind people that there's no right way to do anything. Everyone's different.
Yeah. It's definitely a balance for me of the sports can be, I don't want to say stressful, but kind of. I mean, it is kind of. And there was a friend of mine who described it. He's like, "Man, you have a really high stress job," and I didn't think about like covering sports as being stressful, but it can be. And certainly with Army, I get very emotionally involved in the game and what's happening, and it when you lose, it's horrible. but then it's nice to go out and shoot a waterfall and not have any of those. It's just the complete opposite, I think. And I think it is interesting that I wound up in this place where I am shooting. I could be shooting something at the Garden one night, and then I can go shoot some birds or something the next day. And it's like it's a good balance, where it's like much more relaxing than I have to worry about the 20 things on my mind to capture during a hockey game or a football game or something.
Right. And just for context, for people who don't know, when you're saying I'm shooting Army games or I'm going up to West Point, can you just describe what that is? Just for people who don't have no idea what you're talking about.
You mean everyone doesn't know what Service Academy football is about? Yeah. So for those who don't know, Army football plays at West Point, the United States Military Academy. They're one of 3 military academies in the country: Air Force and Navy in Annapolis. They are colleges. They're college students. They're they're in the Army at West Point. They're cadets. Same thing at Navy and Air Force. So they're balancing a life of preparing for a career in the military as an officer, and in my case, these guys are also playing Division I football. And I don't know how they do it, because it's exhausting for me just every Saturday to go to shoot a game and recover, and then I go sit in my cubicle in New York City for the rest of the week. But these guys are like, going through the stress of surviving West Point. And I mean, West Point is a very high stress environment by design. The Army wants to put these kids through hell for 4 years to get them prepared to be leaders in the military. So I think that was one thing that really drew me to going up there when I started, is these guys were just bound, had so much on their plate, and they were just crushing it. I mean, Army football wasn't dominant when I started. We had a lot of losing seasons, and now we're a competitive team. But yeah, so we play a regular Division I schedule like any other college. There's kind of different tiers of Division I, where you have the SEC teams that are going out there winning national championships. That's not what these service academies are doing. We did play some good teams. We played LSU this year down in Baton Rouge, and it was a crazy experience going up against like this kind of NFL caliber team. Right. And we're a bunch of cadets at West Point who are just not the same size, and they're not going on to NFL careers. And so it's a really interesting perspective on college football, and there's so much passion and there's so much energy behind the team from fans, from graduates. And even if you're not familiar with Army or Navy football, most people have heard of the Army-Navy game. That is like that's our Super Bowl every year. That's the game that it happens every year. Army plays Navy. We're a huge rivalry. It's Yankees Red Sox caliber type of rivalry in football. So, even if we have a tough year like we did this year, it's like you win that game, and it's just like Merry Christmas, and that's how it was this year. We won. So, that's awesome. But yeah, I mean, football keeps me busy from the season starts early September. We had a lot of recruiting photo shoots this summer before the season started, which is a whole other thing to tackle with, getting portraits of these guys that are thinking of committing to going there.
Yeah. Tell us about that. That's interesting, because it highlights the fact that, okay, I'm a sports photographer, but I also maybe need to be a great portrait photographer. Right. And we talk all the time about experimenting and learning in different genres and taking tools from those genres to enhance your career. Right. Yeah. So it'd be interesting to hear about that.
Yeah, I've actually gotten into a lot more portrait photography at West Point in the past couple of years. Not just these recruiting shoots, but at West Point, a lot of the cadets, when they're seniors, they're called firsties at West Point. They like to have these traditional portraits taken of themselves around West Point. If you're not familiar with West Point, it's in the Hudson Valley of New York. It's right on the Hudson River. There's a lot of mountains. It's very scenic, very historic place. The campus is beautiful. There's cannons and all kinds of monuments and statues and old stone buildings. So I love driving around there and just kind of soaking it in. Of course, I didn't go to West Point, so I don't have like the trauma of having survived the place myself. I just, as a visitor, it's great. But a lot of these guys like to have their portraits taken. So I've been doing a lot more of that the past couple of years. People started noticing my football photography, and they're like, "Hey, do you take portraits?" And I was like, "I don't know. I mean, I can try it." It was a little bit out of my comfort zone in terms of just like action sports or, going up to a mountain and shooting the leaves or something. So, so I've been doing a lot of that. But yeah, the recruiting shoots, we had 3 of them this past summer. Army had just hired a guy that was in charge of like creative stuff for the recruiting. Recruiting in college football is a big business in some ways. I mean,
right.
There's 100 something teams in the country, and they're all trying to attract the best caliber players they can to their program. And they have these official visits. There's all sorts of rules of the NCAA, stuff that you would not believe, and from how they can be contacted by teams to how many times they can visit a campus to even with photography, we'll have these guys come in. We have an indoor practice facility. We set up a backdrop. We've got the lights. Everything's triggered and ready to go. And one of the rules is from the NCAA that the players can't pose in a football pose.
Really?
It's like, yeah, they're not allowed to do that if they're standing on grass. And it's like, they'll tell me this, and it's Army, so like I'm used to just like, oh, there's a rule about this, and it's like, okay, I get it, it's the military, but this is like an NCAA rule, and these high school kids they don't know. They want to come in there and they're dropping back like they're going to throw a pass or they're whatever, and then I got to be the bad guy of like, oh, actually, sorry, you can't pose like that because of this rule. Yeah, it's there's a lot of weird stuff like that, and I mean, there's if teams violate it, there's fines and penalties. I don't know that that's a serious penalty if a kid takes a picture in a pose like that. But anyway, it's just like one of these things you got to keep in mind. And we had a few of these sessions, and we had 50 something kids would come in with their families, and it was like, okay, we got an hour to take all these guys, and we split it up last summer with me and this other photographer, and we just kind of pulled guys in, stand here, hold the flag, hold the ball, you got the helmet, take the helmet off, pose like this, you want to get in with your parents, and we were just trying to get as many pictures as we could of these guys, looking cool, looking tough, and it's part of the process. We're kind of treating these guys as, hey, you're kind of the celebrity here, you're coming in for a photo shoot, you're the center of attention. They want to make these kids feel welcome and important, obviously. And so I play probably a very small part of that, of just being the guy who pushes the button on the camera. But they're long.
Maybe maybe your personality that day, your energy, your making your subject feel like they belong at Army. That's an important sell, and maybe that helps win games when you really think about it.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things that go into winning football games, and at West Point, it's like, it's almost kind of secondary because these guys aren't going on to the NFL for the most part. They're going into the military. So, but as a kid in high school, this is an opportunity for them to play Division I football at a historic stadium in New York against some cool teams, and from their perspective, they're putting on the uniform, they're putting on the helmet, and their family's there. So I'm sure it's a cool experience. It's a cool experience for me to be a part of, but it was a lot of hard work. There was a lot of stuff to set up. There was a lot of stuff to take apart afterwards. A lot of heavy equipment to push around, and you got to bring everything back to a locker room. And after, everyone kind of comes, you get all these great photos, and then everyone disappears. And it's like, okay, now we got to clean up all these jerseys and footballs. And we had like an armored Humvee come in for one of these shoots, and we had all these big rifles, and we were trying to incorporate that into a shoot. So it was very fun, and then the season starts, and it's for college football. It's every Saturday. Army plays at noon, so it's like a lot of early wake ups for me. I don't like waking up early, but I got to get to the stadium by at least 10 a.m. So I would say with sports in general, there's just like a lot of planning that you have. The more you can plan ahead and think of like all these scenarios that could go wrong, and if there's ways to avoid them going wrong, I try to do that. In terms of like, what time do I have to get there? Is there going to be a lot of traffic? Who are we playing this week? Is there something going on before the game? Is the opponent a local team? They're going to have more fans, which is going to mean more confused drivers trying to get to West Point. All these things, the weather, and it's like things you don't worry about when you're like, you know what, I'm going to go up to the Adirondacks this weekend and just, drive around and shoot some leaves and
hope
see
for
if
a nice sunset.
you hope for a nice sunset, right? You're like, oh, what's the weather? Oh, it's going to be partly cloudy. Like, this could be good, right? Like, that's as much as a thought as I put into a lot of it. It's like, great. And so if I don't get a great sunset, then I don't get a great sunset. But with sports, it's like, I feel like I have to put myself in a position to like get the right angle and get the right timing and be on the right part of the field. For football, for hockey, what you're saying, I shoot a lot of the Rangers, and it's similar but different because in the NHL they say you've got a hole, it's on the left side of the rink, and that's it, and that's where you are for the whole game, and you might be on the wrong side of the ice for all the big moments, and it's like you have to just figure out how to capture it and tell a story and get usable photos, even if you can't physically move around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had that question. Oh, Aaron, you want to go? Go ahead, buddy.
I just have a couple questions. Thanks.
No problem.
This is an easy one. Home and away games, or just home for Army?
Home and away, yes. I started off traveling with. Yeah. There was a one of your episodes. There was a guy who said photography was a backstage pass to life or something like that. It was a really good quote. And
Jared sang the episode with Jared sang.
Yeah.
Good memory.
Yeah, it definitely hit me. I was like, it is. I mean, we do travel. Mm-hmm. I started traveling with the team in 2016, and I didn't know what to expect. You show up to the airport, you've got a private jet, there's tons of free food. You're treated like celebrities for the whole trip. You've got police escorts that take you everywhere you want to go. There's people cooking food for you, in the afternoon, at night. There's candy, there's drinks, you're in a nice hotel, and everything's just sort of taken care of for the team, for the players, obviously. But I'm kind of
part of the crew.
I'm part of it. So, it was really cool when I first started traveling. It's just like we're on a bus, and there's just like all these state troopers are escorting us down a highway, and like all these cars are just like stopped, and it's just like, really, for us? Like they're doing this for us so we could get to a football stadium? But that's how it is. It's just it's not unique to the Army. That's how it is in college football. There's police escorts, and it's just like, wow. For me, it's like, I spend the rest of the week taking commuter trains into Penn Station and getting, pushed through Lower Manhattan to my office, and it's just I'm this nobody fighting with New York City, and then suddenly it's like, oh, here's your private jet, and what do you want to eat for lunch today? And it's
double life.
It's your life. Wild. It seems like you like both ends of the spectrum, right? Like the busy New York, and then treated like royalty, and then the stress of football photography, and now I'm going to go to the mountains and just
Well, I definitely need the peace and the time to just recover from it all. Mm-hmm. I think. I mean, the trips are really fun, but it starts in September. It ends like right around now, around Christmas, and it's a lot. It's every weekend, and for me, I mean, this is different from other sports photographers maybe, but I work a regular 9-to-5 job during the week. Mm-hmm. So it's like I've got that, and then I've got football on Saturdays, and maybe in the spring and the fall, I've had a lot of these portrait sessions where these cadets will want to schedule, and for me, it's like, all right, Sunday is like the only day in my week that I have any amount of free time that I can go and do this. And so it's exhausting for sure. So that's why I'm kind of like, I've hit a period here where I can just kind of sleep in, and I don't have to set an alarm, and I don't have to be anywhere, which is nice.
Yeah, it's nice to have that breath, but I bet you're the type of guy that if it's too long with that quiet, gets a little like, all right, when's the next thing that I'm doing? I got to do something.
As soon as it stops, you're kind of like, you wake up and you're like, what am I doing today? And it's like, shouldn't I be
weird.
somewhere? Like, isn't there something I should be doing? You know, and which is, you know, a good drive to have, but I think it's also good to be like, actually, like, no, you could just hang out and watch Family Guy today and like not worry about anything, which is good for me. But yeah.
Now, the essence of sports photography to me has always been, I mean, it's nothing that I've really dabbled in. But to me, it seems so easy to miss the big moment. The turnaround play, the fumble that came that turned the game around. And maybe that's not I mean, it's great if you capture that. Maybe it's not the objective of sports photography, but I'm just curious in that arena when you're looking out at the game, you're trying to study it. How much are you guessing ahead of time of like what's going to happen? Like this is going to be a pass play. I know this team. I'm going to look for the wide receivers versus I'm right down the middle looking for a run here. Like how much are you guessing what's going on and how much are you missing? Like, oh crap, I just missed the good thing right there. And I try to get it on the next one without beating yourself up over it, because I would imagine it's so quick that like it'd just be hard to be perfect.
Yeah, no, I think you summed it up pretty well, actually. You do try and position yourself for, you know, what might happen. For me, I think most sports photographers are trying to predict what's going to happen. I mean, obviously you don't know what's going to happen, but you know, there's scenarios in the games, the time left, the score, you know, in football, it's third down and whatever. They have to pass this play? Are they going to run? Just like you said. And so for me, I'm running around a lot in football. I'm always trying to stay ahead of the play and be in a position where the guys are running at me or somewhat towards me. And sometimes you do miss those big plays. And sometimes, a lot of times, it's the referee who just steps in front of you, or it's a coach that steps in front of you, or it's some random person who's working the game on the sidelines who's holding a microphone, or there's so many of those things that are out of your control. And to a degree, you can try and put yourself in a spot where you can minimize the amount of people that are running in front of you. But a lot of times it's unavoidable in sports. Referees are like, you know, the enemy of every sports photographer. I mean, they're probably the enemy of a lot of sports fans. We get aggravated watching games and the calls they make. But for us, it's like you're trying to capture a play, and then you got this guy in black and white stripes who just is like a giant blurry blob in front of your photo, and it's like, oh my god. But like you said, you kind of have to just kind of like roll with it and be like, all right, this happened. I didn't get this. I didn't get that. It doesn't bother me a ton anymore. Although I would say after the game, you'll have that player come up to you or DM you and be like, hey man, did you get that? You get the shot of me making that catch? And it's like, actually I was like on the other side of the field, you know, like I didn't get it, you know, and a lot of times that is the case. We had a Army Navy game was a couple of weeks ago in New England. We had the biggest play of the game. Our Army player on Army forced a fumble, recovered the ball, ran it in for a touchdown. And I was on the opposite side of the field. Navy had the ball; they were coming towards me, so I was preparing to get, you know, their offensive plays coming towards me. And obviously, you know, we picked up the ball and we ran the opposite way. And it was like there was nothing. I have a 400 millimeter lens, and there was just nothing that I could do because there's just all these people on the field, and they're all running the other way, and they're literally 80, 90 yards away from you. Yeah. And it's just sort of like, well, I didn't get that. And it's like, I think when you miss big plays, it sucks, obviously. But from a storytelling perspective, you try and get more photos of that player, right? The guy who had a biggest impact on the game. You at least want to get something of him,
right?
So, you know, for me in that play, the guy who scored the touchdown, he came back to the sideline and he was just going crazy, and all the teammates were jumping on him. And I got my wide angle out and I just found him and I stuck my camera right in front of his face, and I was trying to get, you know, that reaction, that emotion cool in the moment of him at least celebrating it. And I got some cool shots of that, I think. But yeah, sometimes you just miss those plays. In hockey, it happens a lot. Like I was saying, sometimes in a bad position. The last Rangers game I shot, this guy scored one of the bigger goals, and it was on the other side of the ice. And the holes at Madison Square Garden, some of them you just can't angle your camera physically to capture something in a part of the rink, and you just have to sit there and like a fan and kind of just, it is what it is. Like, there's some places on the ice you can't reach. But once he came back into where I was, I made sure to get a bunch of pictures of him, and one of them just ran in the Hockey News a couple of days ago, and it was like, oh, that was a picture I made sure I got of that guy just because he scored a goal, and like you were saying, you're trying to predict these plays and the moments and what's going to happen, but at the same time, for me, and I came from this sports journalism background, I try and think of like what picture is going to run in a website or a newspaper, what are these editors going to be looking for.
Cool.
In terms of like the moment, the player, the composition. I mean, we shoot Instagram. I think a lot of us shoot vertical stuff for Instagram because it looks better on the app. But on website and journalism, they're mostly running horizontal shots. So that affects the way I crop photos. It affects the way I shoot sports, to try and get something that I know can be useful to. With USA Today, it's a wire service, so there's hundreds of media outlets out there, websites, newspapers, magazines, whatever, TV networks that subscribe to it. They could download those pictures that I take or that all of our photographers take. So, right. I'm always trying to think of like what are they going to need, and sometimes it is the big play, but a lot of times it's just an emotional shot of a team celebrating a win. And it's like, you could miss all of those, not that I'm encouraging you to miss big plays in sports, but you could miss a lot of these big plays in a game. And then if you get a great reaction shot at the end where they're celebrating, it's like, that's often the shot that ends up being published anyway. So,
right. I mean, I think that's really interesting for two reasons. Number one, your background in journalism and asking yourself maybe in the moment, what's like you can see the headline of the article. What's the article going to be? Oh, this guy's had a hat trick. They're definitely going to be talking about him. Maybe I didn't get the goals in the moment, but let me get the hats on the ice. Let me get him celebrating the goal with his buddies, hugging, like whatever it is, because that could go with the story just as easily as anything else. Yeah. So I think that's really interesting, number one. And number two, thinking that way is proactive for the next moment, like living in the now. Like, what can I do right now to move forward and go on versus like, I can't believe I missed that shot. Yeah. Like, I just changed my battery right when they score the goal. Right. Like, oh my God. And then you're missing the next shot too. You're missing the celebration because you're whipping yourself, So I think those are two really good points to point out.
Yeah. There was, if you follow the Rangers last season, they had a great team and they fizzled in the playoffs first round. They had traded for a guy named Patrick Kane. If you're a hockey fan, you know who Patrick Kane is. He was a superstar for the last decade, and he was a little injured last year. He came to the Rangers, and it was the end of his contract. And I ended up shooting what ended up being, I think, his last home game with the Rangers. They lost the next game. The season was over. And there was no guarantee he was going to re-sign with the Rangers. So I was like on a mission to get as many like just nice portraits of this guy as possible that I knew were going to end up being run for the entire offseason of all these speculative stories of who is he going to sign with? When is he going to sign with, And that's what happened. For months, I would see these pictures from this one game because I was like the most recent guy, not that they were unbelievable photos, but I was like the most recent guy to photograph him. But it was in my mind of like, these are probably going to be the shots that when editors are searching for Patrick Kane, they're going to see these because they're the most recent ones. So that worked out pretty well.
How do you feel when someone has played terribly and it's going to be the headline? And your photo is just going to dump on them?
Well, I don't know that they'll use photo. Usually it's like they'll use a shot of whoever won the game. I don't know that there's a lot of outlets that are going to focus on the negative stuff.
I'm born and raised Toronto, and the Toronto media, Toronto Maple Leafs are ruthless. So, like, people bleed blue and white in Toronto. I think it's the most insane media hockey place in the world.
I believe it.
Just from an outside perspective.
And they run a lot of negative stories on those. I mean, it's a superstar team.
Google the Toronto Sun, Toronto Maple Leafs. during a playoff run and see what happens. Or in the first 5 games of the season, they're either going to win the Stanley Cup or they're the worst team of all time.
Yeah.
So
I would say, there's shots that I've gotten of guys that just generally look dejected or frustrated that you can anticipate are going to be used as like, oh, this team disappointed, or this guy had a bad season, or something along those lines, where they're specifically looking for a shot of the guy not looking happy. I've gotten those photos. It doesn't bother me necessarily that they're used, but
you feel less bad when you see the paycheck.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm
photographers.
certainly not getting rich off shooting these games. It's fun, but
I'm saying you feel less bad when you see what professional athletes' paychecks are.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, there's a pressure to perform. That's your job, right? You get $10 million. You have one bad game. Boo hoo.
but on the other side of that, with Army, these guys aren't getting paid. They're not.
Good point.
They're college athletes. All college athletes aren't. I mean, most of them aren't getting paid now. Now in this new world of college football, there are call these marketing deals and sponsorships that players have, but it's not happening at West Point. And we, there are some times when our guys get injured or rough things happen during the game, and it's like I feel like I have to take a photo of it, right? Like I'm trying to do my job, but I also feel kind of like terrible for them, so. There is that part of it too.
Well, let me ask you this, just backpedaling a bit. We were talking about, how a ref can get in the way of a great shot, or coach walks in front of you, all things you can't control. And, how being in the right place at the right time is so important, but you can only control so much. And accepting there's a lot of external factors I can't control. What in your mind do you think about, either mentally or from a technical standpoint, where you say, this is 100% within my control and it's going to maximize my chance of capturing the best images I can?
I mean, for football, I really try to get away from people on the sideline if I can. If you're a football photographer, you think these are things you don't notice as a fan watching on TV, but there's these lines painted on the grass, and they're, some of them are meant for media, for photographers not to cross. So I think a lot of us are inching our way as far as we can to those lines, or a little over those lines, to try and get a good angle, because inevitably there are all these people on the sidelines, referees, people holding the balls, guys, players, coaches, trainers. I mean, there's so many, and if something big happens during the game, a lot of them tend to like walk out onto the field. Like they can't help themselves. They're drawn out there, and then it's like, dude, you're blocked. Yeah, I'm trying to get a shot at this guy, and now you're. So yeah, I do run around, and I try and position myself in a place where I feel like it's going to be minimized in terms of getting blocked, but. A lot of it's out of your control, and for hockey, it's definitely out of your control because you can't move around. And yeah, I think you just kind of have to accept sometimes you're not going to get it. I mean, with hockey, you could get a bigger lens and go up higher up and shoot over the glass and avoid some of those things. But I think being on the ice is a better angle. Same with football. You can go up higher in the stands probably and shoot a football game looking down, and you don't have to worry about anyone running in front of you, right? But the closer you are, for me, with sports photography, I like being as low as I can. I'm always kneeling. Sometimes I'll sit down. The low perspective in field sports looks really cool. So I'd rather be down there in the action. And the other part of it is like, you could be in a good place where no one's going to run in front of you, and then suddenly the ball comes your way, and now you've got all these players and people coming straight at you, and it's very easy to get run over. There was a clip. I was going to say,
have you been absolutely crunched before?
I haven't been crunched by a player. I did get hit by a referee. Probably I want to say 2019. I was on the sideline, and he was running kind of left to right from my left. I didn't, it wasn't coming straight at me, right? That's you. Same thing with hockey. You're always worried about a puck coming and hitting your lens, and you just assume it's going to come straight at you. But a lot of times it doesn't. It comes from the side, and you have no idea that's coming. And this referee was just running down the sidelines, and he just ran into the end of my 400 millimeter lens, and it hit. Obviously it pushed it back into my face, the camera, the eyepiece, and it hurt. But I was like, man, what the heck? I was just like stunned, and I looked up, and there was like players and people around me, and they're like, oh, bro, you're bleeding. I was like, what?
Oh no.
And I remember I was like, I didn't know what happened. I stood up and I went over to our team athletic trainer, and I was like, am I bleeding? And he's like, you're going to need stitches. He was like, immediately, he's like, you got to go and get stitches. And I was like, oh my God.
Oh, wow.
And I went to the first aid station at the stadium at West Point, and they had all these Army medics there. And I'm thinking like, all right, I'd never gotten stitches before, but like, I assume these guys are just going to fix it up and finish the game. And they were like, oh, we can't give you stitches here. You're gonna have to go to a hospital, and I was like, really? Yeah. I have photos of it too. It's funny. I've got these soldiers putting bandages on. It was right here, right over my eye.
Wow.
And it didn't even hurt that much, but I think this was a pretty deep cut. And yeah, that was like one of the only games I haven't finished. I had to pack up my stuff. They put this bandage all over my face, and I texted our social media guy or our media guy at Army, and I was like, yo, I got hit. I'm bleeding. I need stitches. I can't shoot the end of the game. And they were like, okay. And I drove home. I drove to like an urgent care, and they gave me stitches.
Damn.
Yeah, it was nuts. And there was a guy.
You see the Army media guy being like David Goggins, like, oh, you're bleeding? You're bleeding a little bit. You're gonna finish the game.
I wanted to finish the game, but these guys are like, you need to leave. You need to like put ice on it and go get stitches. And I was like, okay.
What's worse, the pain of your stitches or the pain of leaving the game?
Oh man.
Yeah, that was
This is why you don't like refs. They're in your way and they smash you up.
I was trying to figure out who it was after the game. Like, who is this guy? Why did he do this to me?
No pictures for you.
He probably had no idea that he even hit me. And I got a great sequence of our quarterback carrying the ball, nice clean shots, and then suddenly you see it just like obscured by the referee, and that was it. And I was like, oh, this is when he ran into me.
Oh man.
But otherwise, I don't think I did get a puck that hit my lens at a Rangers game. I want to say it was like 2017 or so. Mm-hmm. Same thing, puck rattling around the glass. I didn't see it coming, glanced off the edge of my lens, and it just shattered the lens filter that I had on the front.
Now, does Rangers hockey help you with that one? Or is that on you?
No, that was on me. And it was frustrating because I couldn't, it was the lens filter got cracked and shattered and kind of spider webbed, and I couldn't get it off. I figured, all right, the lens is okay. I think I can just take the filter off and finish the game. And it was just like dented and just stuck on there. And, with hockey, it's like, you need a lens that fits in that little hole in the glass, and there's only, I use a 70 to 200 for hockey, which I think is probably a pretty common or popular choice if you're on the glass. And I didn't really have anything else that I could use to finish the game. I ended up shooting the rest of the game with this shattered filter, and it was okay. It was like the pictures kind of lacked contrast because it was shooting through this massive cracks, but you probably wouldn't have otherwise known that I was shooting through a
really
filter. Yeah, it was wild. I remember telling my editor from USA Today, I was like, my lens got hit. It's all shattered. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And they're like, oh man, that sucks. I was like, yeah, it does suck. Like, I don't know what to do. This has never happened to me. But I finished the game, and I had to take the lens over to Canon in New Jersey, and their technicians, surgically removed the filter for me. So the lens was fine.
Oh,
wow. Ended up getting a new filter, but that was, I don't know how many years ago. I'm still paranoid when I'm at a game and you hear the puck rattling around the glass, and I just like, I have to go back because I don't want that happening again.
No.
Right. Well, let's talk gear then. What your Canon, by the sounds of it. I can't. Yep. I think maybe you said that. And what bodies do you have, and what's coming with you to a certain sporting event?
Yes, Canon. I have 1DX Mark II is my main camera. 1DX, the original, is kind of my secondary. They're not super new, but I love them. They get the job done for me. They're very reliable, high frame rate. The battery life is pretty good on them. So I use the 1DX Mark II primarily as for football for whatever, really, for all my stuff. For football, I'm taking my 400 2.8. That lens is, it's awesome. It's huge. It's very heavy. It's a pain in the ass to haul around, especially on airplanes and on buses. I'm a big guy, and I get on a bus with the football players, and they are all big guys, and we're squished in there. And I've got my bag of camera gear, and I've got this lens, and it's just really awkward to travel with the thing because it's so big. Mm-hmm. For football, I'm usually mostly the 400 2.8. I've got the 70 200. I have a 16 to 35 2.8 wide angle zoom, and
when did those lenses come out? For what scenario is this particular lens going on your body? We're in the end zone, we're with 20 yards within the end zone. Like, what's happening? How's your mindset changed from a technical standpoint of what you're going to use?
Yeah, I try to use the 400 as much as I can because I think it makes everything just look amazing. But yes, if they're in close to the end zone, it's sometimes, depending on where you are, if you're in the very back of the end zone and you're basically 10, 15 yards away from them on the goal line, then it is too tight, and I'll switch to the 70 to 200. If I'm in the corner of the end zone and I'm shooting kind of almost across the end zone and they're 30 yards away, then the 400 is still a good option for me, I think. But yeah, sometimes you just have to be quick about switching. If you watch NFL and you look at the guys in the khaki vests in the back of the end zones, some of them are caught flat-footed, and they're just standing there as the guys are celebrating right in front of them, and they're not even they're just like stunned, But some of them are really quick. They'll switch to their wide angle, they'll switch to their 70 to 200, and they'll get all those shots.
Honestly, I'd be pulling out my brand new, if I was, professional like that, I'd have the newest iPhone. And I would just be, seriously, I don't know if that's not very professional, but
the wide angle lens on the iPhone's great. I love it.
Right?
I actually had to use an iPhone once because I didn't know what else to do. It was an Army-Navy game. Army-Navy's played every winter in December. It was snowing, and just, you're outside, it's cold, but it was, I guess because of the snow, it was kind of humid or damp or whatever meteorological term it is for it. But it was cold and wet, right? And your lenses get, accustomed to the temperature. And then we won the game. We run inside to the locker room. It's hot as hell in there. And there's 100 football players, and they're all screaming and jumping around. And my lenses just fogged up immediately.
Right.
And these guys, and it's just this moment of raw emotion that you want to capture. We just beat our biggest rival, and everyone's going crazy. And I'm just looking through my camera, and it's like, you can't see anything. It's just all fog. And I do remember taking out my iPhone. I was like, I don't know what else to do, because the iPhone was fine. And I was just trying to take whatever I could, because I felt like, you talk about things that are out of your control. Like, I felt like that was just like, what am I going to do? Like, I don't know. There's nothing I can do. This camera is just physically covered in condensation and fog. And the next year I went and put like a third camera body in the locker room, just let it sit there the whole game with a wide angle lens. Just so, like, in the event that it rains and it's cold and we go in and this happens again, I've got a camera that's like adjusted to that temperature. But I do use the iPhone pre-game. I'll help out our social media guy at Army. I'll take videos of the guys in warm-ups or things like that, and then I'll just text it to him, and he can put it on our Instagram or Twitter. So I feel like I'm trying to make myself useful in that regard.
Now, have you ever been in a situation, I actually have a family member who's just gotten into football photography, funny enough, 16, 17-year-old kid, just landed his first gig doing, like a private league on weekends. And so I guess in a general sense, what advice would you offer to somebody maybe younger, just starting off in that genre? And also, to your point, or to your last statement about how you're sending videos or photos to your social person, if you're doing that yourself, right, I think it's probably important that you want to post in a timely manner during the game, during warm-up, immediately after. How do you make that workflow as fast as possible? Do you have experience in this?
What I use personally is I have this little adapter that fits my CF card. The two 1DXs both use CF cards, so I guess it also takes like SD cards, but I use the CF cards, and it lets me plug it into my iPhone, and I can see all the images if it works. And it doesn't always work, but when it works, it shows up immediately on my phone. I can import them, and then I just text them off to whoever needs. It's usually our main social media guy at Army. His name is Matt, and whoever else might need them. But that, and you talk about planning and trying to think ahead, like that's a big part of it. Like we get to the stadium early. One of my first things is like, is there Wi-Fi in general? Some of these stadiums have great Wi-Fi. Some of them don't at all. And once there's 10, 20, 30,000, 40,000 people in the stadium, the cell phone service is like dead. It's very frustrating. So one of the things I try and do when I first get to a stadium is like, where can I set up my computer? Is there Wi-Fi? Can I plug it in? Can I use Wi-Fi on the field? Because inevitably what happens is we'll score a touchdown. They'll go to a TV commercial break, which is like 2 to 3 minutes. Conveniently, there's a guy who stands on the field with a big clock, so you know exactly how much time you have. I'll go down the sideline, I'll kneel, I'll take my card out, I'll pop it into this adapter, plug it into my iPhone, try to quickly get the key photos. I'll download them, and then hopefully I have Wi-Fi or good enough cell phone service, and I'll text it to our social guy as quickly as possible. He puts together graphics.
Wow.
And they're on Twitter and on Instagram within minutes, if it all goes together.
And the social's already working on caption, all that stuff already, huh? That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, our social guy's got his little templates, and he's very talented, and he doesn't even have to ask me at this point. I think he just expects that we scored a touchdown. Within a couple of minutes, I'm going to send him, unless the cell phone service is not cooperating or their Wi-Fi is not working, then I'll have the photos there, and which is cool. And I like to. It's like for me, I don't have time during the game to pull out my phone and look at this stuff and see what they're posting. But afterwards, I just assume it's getting done, and afterwards I'll take a look and be like, oh, that I remember taking that photo like 3 hours ago, and there it was. Right. So that's typically my workflow. The adapter, I got it on Amazon. It's not very reliable. I end up buying backups and keeping them in my bag in the event that they break, and they inevitably just will randomly stop working, and it's very aggravating. But I haven't found a better solution to that. I mean, obviously, if you have a camera that has like Wi-Fi capabilities, you can wirelessly transmit it to your computer, to your phone, or to an FTP or something like that. Then that's easier. But the Canon cameras I have don't have those transmitters. So
right. So and I guess what you're sending for speed's sake is just straight out of camera. There's no way to apply any basic corrections.
Yeah. I'm just sending whatever I can as quickly as I can. Yeah. And it's hard. And we talk about iPhone. We beat Navy a few weeks ago. We're in the locker room and the team's just going crazy. And I took a couple of pictures with my iPhone with a wide angle shot, and just to send them, because I'm like, once you're in the locker room and they're celebrating, you're there for a while. And it's like, the rest of the world is like, oh, the game's over. They want to see, the celebration. But it's like, when you're actually part of the celebration, you can't just like walk out, I stay there till the end. Yeah. So I did try and get some quick shots just to send to her. I don't know if they were even used, but I don't know. I try to be mindful of the timeliness of it. And obviously social media, people are looking at the stuff the whole game. They're sitting on their phones, even in the stands, and they're just looking at social media. So I think it's cool to get it out there.
So then another question in that sense, are you snapping RAWs combined with JPEGs and sending the JPEGs off as a smaller file size?
I do that with nature and landscape stuff. With sports, I just shoot JPEG. It's always been good enough for me. I know there's some people that it's definitely quicker. I don't feel like I need the RAW file myself. If I can nail the exposure and the white balance in the camera, not that I always do, but I try to, then it's fine. It is what it is. For photojournalism, I feel like, less is more when it comes to editing. There's certainly a lot of editors that feel like, oh, you shouldn't really do much to it, right? You could crop it, you could sharpen it, or adjust the contrast or something. But I try not to do too much to it. And now with Photoshop, you've got all these AI things that will generate all sorts of stuff that, is fun to use, but with photojournalism, you can't do that. So
are you using AI at all in your business or at work or in what you do at all? It's a trendy topic right now. I want to get in the habit of asking photographers this, either for answers of don't use it at all, don't care to, or I'm fully integrating it into my practice?
The only stuff I've used it for is the Photoshop generative expand option. I don't know if you've used that, but you can kind of.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was just telling my boss about this at MLB a couple of weeks ago, and he was like totally blown away that I was doing it or that you could do it. But basically, if you look on MLB.com, or I work primarily on the minor league site, which is MILB.com. And if you look at a player page, there's action photos, assuming I've uploaded them. I don't upload them for everyone, but we try to upload action shots of the players at the top of their page, and they're 3x1. So it's a weird crop. Even if you're shooting horizontal, it's weird. It's a weird ratio.
Right.
So a lot of times I'll crop these photos as like kind of a photo editor at work, and I'll crop them, bell tie or middle of the chest up to the top of their head, a guy swinging or a guy throwing a pitch. But in the 3x1, the both sides of the photo, there's like it doesn't reach. So either you have to crop it differently, or when this new AI stuff with Photoshop came out, it lets you just paint in sort of like background. And for baseball, I wouldn't recommend it for photojournalism. Certainly, it's like you get into an ethical discussion about it. For these, it's like they're like empty seats behind a guy throwing a pitch, right? So it's like I tried it once. So I was like, wow, it looked amazing. Like you would not be able. It just paints in outfield walls or blurry out of focus fans or empty seats, and it's like, oh, this looks great. And so I did get into that a little bit this year, where I was just able to take a photo that otherwise would have been cropped really tightly, and I was able to kind of frame it nicely and filled it in with Photoshop's AI stuff on the side, which I thought was cool. I have tried it with some of my landscape stuff, just kind of messing around. Definitely like drone stuff. My drone shoots in whatever it is, like 4x3. It's kind of almost square ratio, and it's like sometimes I just want like a wide shot or a tall shot. So I started playing around with that this year, adding some of it. I think it's kind of limited at this point in terms of the resolution that it generates. If you have a high resolution photo and you add in the stuff with Photoshop currently, it doesn't look very sharp. It's kind of pixelated and blurry. I don't know if they're going to fix that at some point.
But I think it has to do also with the size you're trying to fill. I think Mike Aaron mentioned that. Gilling. Yeah.
I forget what the stats were, but he was like, just do little chunks at a time if you
can. That's basically what you have to do. Which is a pain in the ass depending on what you're doing. But but if you I don't know, if you resize a photo, if you're just posting on Instagram and you want to shrink it down in Photoshop and then just do it, I've done it. I think it's cool.
Instagram has a new AI prompt in the stories, at least I saw.
I haven't played with that.
I don't have this update.
It worked. I didn't use it, but it worked really nicely because I liked my background. I just posted a photo of my dog with a Christmas tree behind it, and I liked it. But it was like, do you want to try something new? And
I'm gonna pull this up.
We'll find the subject, and then it did perfectly. And then I was like, do a winter holiday Christmas scene, and it did like a nice job. I was like 50-50, like, should I use this? Or it was a bit much. It was a bit wintry.
It's scary how good it is.
No, and I mean, I posted the real photo. It's a real photo. I just went through the whole steps, and it did a nice job.
That's interesting.
Yeah. It's going to be it'll be a thing more and more.
It's definitely going to be a thing. Yeah. I have used, if you get the Lightroom app for iPhone, it's a very cool app for editing. I use it a lot just to edit photos on my phone. But now there's like a blur tool in there where you can kind of blur out. It kind of automatically detects. Yeah, it detects like a subject, or you can put it on a focal point, and then you can adjust the background blur. And it looks. I do it sometimes just to kill time. I'm walking to work. I work near Times Square, Radio City. There's like the Christmas trees there, the subway, like all kinds of crazy stuff that you can see. And it's like sometimes I'm just bored and I'll take pictures, and then I'll go into Lightroom and I make them look like I took them on a, like on a 51.4 or something like that. I was like, nope, that was actually from my iPhone with their fancy.
You could sell your 400 2.8.
Yeah. But it is. I mean, to go back to when I was in college and I had this little point and shoot camera, and I was getting these awesome photos from a professional photographer. I'm like, why don't my photos? Like, I didn't understand depth of field and focal. I didn't know any of this stuff. I was an idiot at the time, and now it's like you could probably take a picture with a point and shoot camera and use these AI tools to get a nice, really blurry background and really nice depth of field, and people probably wouldn't know the difference.
Yeah, it's getting better and better.
It is. Yeah.
I was just in California with a couple friends, and one friend who came out isn't a photographer by any means, but he bought like a little point and shoot Sony for the trip. And it had one of those like little electronic zooms that comes out to went out to 720 on this little tiny point and shoot.
Really?
Yeah,
Jeez.
and you're thinking these photos are gonna be garbage, and then he shows us like back of camera and like, what do I have all this thousands of dollars of gear for? I can just be out in the field with a little point and shoot, killing it, throw it into Lightroom, use the new bokeh feature, and call it a day. Don't need to pine over the 400 prime anymore.
Seriously, you don't have to carry it, which is
carry it.
I don't have to carry it.
I think
TSA would love me a lot more.
That's funny. Love it. So we're at the hour mark. To wrap things up, we like to ask one simple question. And I mean, Seth, this might be a question we keep for a little bit, and it might change flavors. But right now, the flavor of the month is, if you could tell your younger photography self something, something you'd want to, if you could do things over potentially, or
piece of advice
to your younger self in photography, what would it be?
I mean, to myself or to anyone in general, it kind of goes back to what you were saying about your friend who's getting into football photography. With sports, it's
maybe from yourself, like the best lesson you've learned, or maybe the mistake you wouldn't want to make again, or anything.
I think for me, it was just getting as much experience as I could, and I would say that's what you should do now in terms of for sports. It could be really shooting whatever you can, whatever is accessible to you, and pro sports are kind of literally inaccessible to a lot of people, right? Like you can't just show up at Yankee Stadium and say, "Hey, man, I want to go shoot the game today." But you can go to your local high school and get right on the side of the field. So I would say whatever experience you can get with sports, just shooting it is going to help you learn how to shoot it, where to be, how to expose, to understanding how to caption certain moments, the emotions. Little league baseball is at its core not that dissimilar from a major league game, right? I mean, it's the same plays, and the guys are not obviously able to do the same things that major leaguers can do, but you can go to a little league game and get some awesome photos of little kids with, crying or thrilled that they just got a hit, or, whatever. There's a whole range of emotions with that. And, for me, I did a lot of high school stuff after college, and it was a really good experience shooting sports that I had never seen before. I'd never seen like field hockey, or I'd never gone to a swimming meet in college, but you go to high school and you can shoot all this stuff. And, especially if you don't have top end gear, it forces you to really understand, like, how do I expose for this really crummy, high school gymnasium lighting? What do I do to, freeze it with a proper shutter speed with limited, technology in your camera, or the lighting. Is a lot of it's very difficult at the lower levels, and I think that was good, a good way for me to learn, just to learn how to do the basics of it all. But in terms of experience, I feel like the pandemic kind of set a lot of us back. It certainly set me back. Like it was sort of like, oh, you can't go outside now. You can't do any of this stuff. Sports were getting canceled. There was no fans allowed, right? There was a lot of restrictions speaking about the Rangers, like they weren't allowing anyone besides, I think, AP or Getty Images to come shoot games for like the whole 2020 season. And it's like, it's very easy to kind of get sucked into of that mode of like not going out, not putting yourself out there, not trying to get these different experiences. And I look back at my younger self and I was like, man, I can't believe I went and I interned at this newspaper, I interned at this minor league baseball team, and it was really good experience meeting people, networking, making those connections, and just seeing how things are how things operate from, talk about the backstage thing of just seeing, if you want to get into sports photography, it's a great way to see how things work behind the scenes. And if it's something that you think you would enjoy to being a part of, there's a lot of nights and weekends when it comes to sports. There's certainly a lot of people that work in sports that get burnt out because the hours and the time commitment, and so I would say, as much experience as you can get is going to help with a career, but also just sort of learning the fundamentals of photography.
Excellent stuff. Well, Danny, thank you very much, man. That was awesome. I learned a lot.
Oh, cool. Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it was great. It was great to finally meet you face to face over the interwebs. But yeah, let's stay in touch.
Yeah, sounds good.